talks on how to improve the global financial architecture have been a common feature at the ongoing IMF World Bank meetings. Private sector institutions have been making the case for an expansion of lending and investment capacities. They also want to see discussions tackle the high levels of debt distress in the developing world and come up with a plan for climate change and poverty. Uche Okoronkwo spoke with Suzman, CEO of the Gates Foundation, about his expectations.
We feel it's really important to keep that human dimension front and center throughout. We know this is a time of real crisis across large parts of the global south and large parts of the continent of Africa. We have well over 50 countries in debt distress where they're having to pay more in debt service than they are in health and education. We're seeing challenges and shortfalls in traditional bilateral aid that comes into these areas. And we're seeing big constraints for many of these countries and their own domestic resource mobilization. And so for all of it, we're trying to say, let's try and maximize the amount of resources available, which does require the World Bank and other partners to step up and find new forms of capital, both experimenting with hybrid capital, but also in time replenishing key instruments like IDA, which is the International Development Association. It's the pool of money that the bank has, which lends primarily 75% of the borrowers of IDA come from Africa.
Now, reforms aren't just about funding, they're also about cooperation. So what are your thoughts on the changes that we need to see there?
Well, absolutely. Look, there are a critical series of partnerships already. I mean, these are the IMF and the World Bank, other regional development banks like the African Development Bank. Entities like us work hand in glove with national governments who set their own priorities to help maximize the impact of those resources. That clearly trying to provide frameworks where there is a clearer shared vision. So, for example, in the climate space you were talking about, we would like to see a big deliverable at the upcoming climate summit at the UAE to really be a much bigger focus on adaptation. That's an area that we see has been comparatively neglected, and that would be a very concrete area where we could see much greater collaboration across these institutions, both entities like the World Bank focusing on it, African countries and others actually articulating that as a core priority for them, partnerships like our own coming in to help say, well, what are the highest value investments, whether it's in drought and flood resilient seeds or livestock. So, there are a number of examples like that. That's a very concrete one where we are hoping to see action in the next few months.
Well, looking specifically at issues such as debt, is the G20 framework working? What are the concrete steps you think need to be made to solve that issue?
Yes, so if we take a step back, the debt crisis didn't come out of nowhere. It's been developing over the last few years with the big cycle of increase in interest rates, plus the broader challenges that came from COVID. And so I think at a headline level, it's certainly disappointing to see how slow the progress has been made in terms of the multiple debt relief negotiations for key countries. That said, I do think we are at, hopefully, a turning point, that the G20 Common Framework is an important step forward, that key countries like Zambia, and I was just at a breakfast with the Minister of Finance from Zambia, have now made concrete deals which are nearly finalized. It's still finalizing some details with private creditors, but with multilateral creditors, bilateral creditors, including China. We have advanced discussions going on with other countries like Ethiopia, Ghana. Certainly, we would like to see the proof of it will be in the acceleration of those discussions in coming months and actually coming up with concrete relief proposals that will unlock resources that can be invested back in health and development. But yes, even though the lead up has taken longer than we believe it could and should have, I think the common framework at least provides a good basis to move forward and try and accelerate these discussions.